Thank you for coming, thank you for all you do, and thank you for all you've done since the last time we met. Now, we do have an amazing education programme over the next 3 days, both on this stage, the liquid stage in the Palais, and of course on demand online via the website. As always, we hope to provide education that's practical, relevant and interesting, but we know that we've assembled an amazing group of educators and experts for you today. Some basic housekeeping. Please save the questions till the end. I will be circulating with a microphone, and you don't have to wear your mask necessarily sitting here, but when you do use the microphone later, please put the mask on. Secondly, take any trash with you when you go, etc. And thirdly, I'm not going to give long biographies and long introductions about this talk, because to a certain extent, these people need no introduction, and secondly, you don't need to be told about the talk that you're coming in to sit and listen to, etc. So, I'm now going to change that by giving a long biography. So, no, long introduction. So one of the BCB sessions that I was proudest about presenting was a talk entitled Cool Tools in, and I had to check it this morning, 2009, where I showed off swizzle sticks and tiki mugs and even a smoking gun to show some of the cutting-edge equipment that you needed to have. And fun though it was, it has dated rather badly, and I felt it was time to update it. These days, the lines between kitchen and bar, and even bar and laboratory, have been all but erased, and the tools and equipment needed to create a cutting-edge beverage program in the 2020s are very different to a bit of wood or a funky and possibly problematic mug. And where do you spend your money, and is it truly necessary? Bale and McBean are the perfect people to discuss and explain this, as their company Crucible in London is the first creative hub for such equipment and ideas for bars and bartenders to come and play with and experiment with. And that's after long careers at the sharp end of some of the most innovative cocktail programs in the world. But before I welcome them and let them go on, it would be remiss of me not to point out that online currently, the Mood Therapist has done 2 practical videos about the use and theory behind a rotovap as well. So please do go on at some stage and see perhaps some of the ideas of how to use these incredible tools. And now I will step back and let these 2 fine gentlemen present weapons of choice. Cheers. Thank you.
Can you all see that? You can't. It's going to be quite boring here, is that right? Thank you for coming. Appreciate that there's that many people out there. They turn the mics on for us as well. I'm Will.
We're from Crucible. Crucible is like a kind of creative agency for. We run a creative agency from there, but then we also have a kind of co-working space for bartenders. I was doing consultancy, and it was just kind of destroying my kitchen, and I kind of figured that if I needed a place to have access to these kinds of equipment, then other people would like to use a space like that. So we have a lab in London, and we let people come and make a mess of it, and it's quite fun.
In addition to that, we do MPD, we do training programs, we do a bit of brand advocacy, kind of broad spectrum consultancy stuff. Mostly, well not mostly, but we've got a lab and have been kind of long advocating the use of various bits of kit in the extraction of flavours. So that's why Angus asked us to come here today and talk to you a little bit about weapons of choice.
So it's going to be like quite a whistle-stop tour. I mean, a lot of these bits of equipment that we're going to talk about, we could do a full presentation on just that. But we're going to run through all of the kind of things that are on our radars just now, and what we think of them and how you could be using them and how maybe you shouldn't be using them.
So we've got, it's all a bit subjective. Obviously there's different bits of equipment you might want to use depending on your circumstances, but we've come up with a set of criteria so that you don't have to take our opinions as gospel. It's a very scientific set of criteria just to make some judgments. So each bit of equipment is going to be analysed on the base of usefulness. So is it actually useful? It seems like a silly question, but there's quite a lot of bits of kit that you definitely don't need. Cost, is it worth it?
How expensive?
Sustainability, so it might be useful and reasonably priced, but how easy it is to use. We look at sustainability in a lot of different ways, and I think this is not only to do with how much energy or staff hours or plastic that it uses, but actually everything has a footprint, so we want to have a little bit of a look at that as well, and we've done it scientifically. And obviously the most important thing for a lot of people, grammability. So it might be useful, it might be cheap, it might be super sustainable, but if it doesn't make you look cool on the internet, do you want one? So before we start talking about the equipment, we're going to talk about some ground rules. So can you see Jeff Goldblum? I can't really see it from here. Dr. Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park. I hope you can see that. So what he says here is your scientists were so preoccupied with whether they could that they didn't stop to think as if they should.
Yeah, and I think the point remains that if one takeaway, if you take one thing away from this, is if you're just going through a process for the sake of it, then it's not like there's just no need for it.
I mean, clarifying or rotovapping or adding weird ingredients sound clever is pointless. So it's important to have a clear idea of what you're doing to the flavour. This is the same outside of the drinks industry too, so you can start off with a really good idea and you can get a bit carried away, and before you know it, you're trying to go to space. The other thing is about the creative process that it's not a straight path. So it's important
you need to be able to let ideas go. Like we see so many people coming in and they get fixated on something and they try and spin it and try and prototype it, and it's just not working. But they've got a heart set on they want to use this process and they want to do it, and you have to accept where to go. I mean, Stephen King, the author, is very put this very succinctly.
It is a bit dramatic, but and he's talking about writing, and but do you want to talk about face melters? Explain what a face melter is.
Yeah, so a face melter is a session that we run regularly in Crucible. We can't call it, we call it face melter when we're doing it to small groups, we can't call it face melter when we're doing it for the drinks companies because they don't like that. We have everyone in and we kind of run the young bartenders through all of the bits of equipment. We'll make a drink on a rotovap, we'll make a drink on the centrifuge, we'll carbonate something, maybe we'll centrifuge something, then we'll carbonate it. And we kind of do all that in the morning, then we break for lunch and have a few beers, and then we come back in the afternoon and we let people loose on the machines. And that's when things can go really, really well or really wrong. And we can see both ways.
I think the point is that we spent a lot of time watching bartenders pursue ideas that should have been killed in their infancy. I mean, I watched someone make an asparagus drink once that went on for about 3 hours and turned from kind of vaguely interesting into kind of fizzy urine by the end. And that happens a lot. And I think the way that you approach flavour is super important. I mean, at the end of the day, it either tastes good or it doesn't. So coming at things in a vague, scientific way is a good idea.
So I think that what is a really important thing to take away from all of these bits of equipment, like the whole point in any of this is to extract flavour. Now, flavour molecules are primarily either polar or non-polar, so they're either going to dissolve in water or fat. Now, alcohol, vinegar sit in the middle of that, so that's why alcohol is so good for extracting flavours, because it has one polar end and one non-polar end. But all of these different bits of kit are able to extract flavour from like biological things in different ways, and all we're trying to do is use them to the best of their abilities to get extraction. And I think that's something you always have to remember.
So most of the bits of kit that we're due to talk about in a second have been on the market for a while and are quite often fairly widely used. So I think we're going to argue that in a lot of cases they're underused or used with the wrong end goal in mind, probably. That's not to say that messing around with stuff is a bad idea. We're watching this show on Netflix and I've completely forgot what it's called. It's about music. Remember? I can't remember. But this is a really important thing. You can write this history of electronic music as the history of creative misuse of tools. DJing is offensive because people realise that turntables don't just need to be for playback. So, yeah, that kind of thing, yeah. So messing about with stuff and making mistakes does lead you to good places.
But it is important to know the rules and know what you're setting out to do before you start breaking the rules.
So what we're hoping to do here, beyond a sort of relatively critical analysis of the available equipment, is to show people how to approach these machines. So now we've talked roughly about approaches. We'll talk about kit, and because this is what most people are here for, we're going to get to this one first.
There's an absolute obsession with the rotor-up, and it's really interesting. I think the reason that people do it is because, I know that one of the reasons I really like choosing it was because when I left university to start doing drinks, my parents were really fucked off, and being able to have something like the rotor-up, it looks science, it looks like, hey mum, I've got a real job. And I really think there's quite a lot of that. That's a big reason why it's being used and why it's so widespread just now.
So it's about people's parents not thinking they've got a real job. The rover kind of fixes this because it makes you look a little bit like a scientist. You can convince your mum that you haven't just been doing burning shots and collecting bad tattoos all your life. You've actually been doing science, right? Everyone likes science. And with a little knowledge leads from distillery tours and whatnot, and the fact that quite a few people don't really know how rotor-maps work.
I think what's great about it is, it kind of works like a CD player. Like you can plug and play, and you can turn it, and you broke that, and you can get great flavours from it. I think my favourite quote about the rotor-vat was from Dave Arnold, who referred to the rotor-vat as a flavour scalpel, and I think that's a really accurate thing, that you can pinpoint your accurate flavours. Go back to the quote from Jace Clayton about misusing equipment. The rotor-vat is primarily used for pharmaceuticals and petrochemicals. When you look on the solvent library, you can put in unleaded, you can put in crude oil and push unleaded, and you'll get petrol out. I haven't worked out what you put in, but use the button, you can put a chloroform. Like, it's a mad bit of kit, man. But when you start speaking with the chemists, then you realise that flavour, it's very difficult to put flavour into the chemicals they understand. So if I say, hey, Mr. Science Man, I want to get a lemon flavour, then he's like, oh, what chemical is that? The lemon's actually a broad spectrum flavour, so there is that kind of disconnect between how we use it and how we should use it.
So quite often it's kind of used with kind of misunderstanding of what its limitations are or what it's actually for. Fundamentally, it's not for making things clear. Sugar doesn't go over, nor salt, nor minerals, nor bitter elements. So if your rotor-vat has quite a lot of stuff to lose on the other side, what you kind of get is a weird facsimile of the flavour. So kind of if you translated it into another language and translated it back again. It really gained popularity because it democratised the distilling process. So it opened up possibilities to people. Do you want to just talk about sides of it real quick?
Yeah, you can use both sides of it as well. It's quite interesting. Like sometimes you want to use that side that's left over, and sometimes you want to use the distillate. We've done things where you actually use both sides. Like we put a Manhattan in that side, and then so you distill off, so you get a kind of white dog Manhattan, and then on this side we have like a kind of thick, woody, kind of quite bitter syrup, and then we made that into ice cream, and then so then at the bar we served like this kind of white dog Manhattan with some kind of rich ice cream, which was great. It was really interesting, but then it's really interesting. We would like, would just the Manhattan would be better? And that's very.
So it's exceptional at creating single stable distillates.
Yeah.
They're a clear expression of the flavour they need without heat, crucially. But in a lot of cases, there's a cheaper, simpler way of making it. So the rotor-vat, to kind of sum up really quickly, it's quite hard to say that it's essential for the modern bar.
How do we get Samosa?
So I don't know. There's good drinks out there in the rotor-vat, but there's quite a lot that aren't.
So I think it's safe to say that we've tried more bad drinks than good drinks.
I would say so. So,
I think what's important with the robot is that it's a piece of equipment, it's not an ingredient. And I think it's quite often used as an ingredient in drinks, or on menus it can be used as an ingredient.
So cost-wise, they come in at about 14,500 euros, got a slide probably, which in post-Brexit UK is 14,500 pounds. Sustainability, it can be time and cost efficient, but it can be an absolute waste of time. And programmability, you are definitely getting your money's worth there. Not quite sure what this is. Okay, something going on there. Next bit of key, guys, is the centrifuge.
Centrifuges are really fun. I mean, clarification is very much in vogue, and they're quite expensive. But as always, why is the key. I mean, they're very important in carbonation. It's very difficult to carbonate things without it being clear.
So if we're talking about clarification, we're talking about orange juice. Most people,
this is Will's opinion, but this is
smooth orange juice is more delicious than bubbly orange juice, and we'll fight about this if anyone wants to talk about it later. But the pulp adds business, makes texture weird. So removing suspended matter with a centrifuge is a taste issue, it's a texture issue, it's a storage issue. Less organic stuff means more shelf life, obviously. It's also a carbonation issue, so if you want to carbonate something, having less crap floating around in it is good because it reduces your nucleation points, and it's a lot easier to make cloudy stuff visible.
I think a really interesting thing with the centrifuge is if you put in certain things, then you can separate out kind of 3 layers. Like one of the favourite things to put through is peas, like a bag of frozen peas. And you put through the frozen peas and you get like a lot of pea kind of shit at the bottom, and you get some really nice pea water. And then in the middle you have this kind of layer of pea fat. It's like 3% of the total volume you put in. But when you put the pea fat like on toast, or you put the fat wash or whatever, but the pea fat that comes out of there is like, it's fucking ridiculous.
So those are all good reasons to clarify something. Bad reasons to clarify something, novelty.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I don't know if any of you share the opinion, but a clear Bloody Mary was one of the worst things that has ever happened. And when you wake up in the morning and you're feeling a bit rough and you want a Bloody Mary, and you want that texture, you want that comforting feeling, and then if you get something that has texture that makes the Bloody Mary, man.
So you could probably make a small argument for the element of surprise. Everyone likes something that looks a bit different than it's supposed to taste.
I think there is an argument for the element of surprise, but I would also say that if you're going out for a drink, do you want to sit and be comfortable and nice, or do you want to be surprised? That's a constant dilemma.
Yeah, and with the espresso martini as an example, if you were going to clarify one of these, there's a lot to this drink. It looks great, it's got great texture, but the oils from the espresso have got that foam. So if you're going to take those things away, then you better be replacing them with something to make an equal or greater combination to the drink. Ta-da! It's clear. It's not good. So if you want to clarify something, most ways to clarify something are a pain in the arse. You might start with coffee filters. You might involve pectinex to break down the pectin. You might use a super bag. You can even kernel it before filtering it overnight in a fridge like a milk punch.
I think the short story is that most of these are appalling, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you could use egg white, but it's not the 70s. So, ensure clarification is a long-winded process. The machines go at 5,000 RPM, it's 80 times a second, and they separate by density. So the heavy stuff goes to the bottom. They're used in medicine
Yeah, so originally they would be used to separate blood.
Plasma from blood.
It's always quite funny when you get one delivered to the place because normally they're used to dropping off at hospitals. So they're quite confused.
So what happens is you spin them for about 15 minutes, you get punctured fibrous material at the bottom, and the suspended particles gone, you get clarified liquid on top, and that can be poured off and you're ready to go. The downsides of the centrifugal seems very easy, but there's a small capacity, so a regular one, you're probably getting a litre of clarified, slightly less than a litre of clarified liquid every 15 minutes.
Again, as with most things, there's a way around them because if you can adjust your recipes and make a more concentrated recipe, spin it, and then dilute it down with water. That's just another process.
Unless
Also, a downside to that is that it's quite scary. It's quite noisy.
yeah, a little bit scary. I was going to say you can get a big one if you're really rich, but they can be a bit of a blunt object too. So spinning creates heat, so you can't clarify things like the aforementioned milk punch. But in the majority of cases, it's definitely a shortcut. The spinning wheel. Have a technical issue. Okay, yeah, we're good. So usefulness, honestly, they're really useful.
Yeah, it's very good.
They save you an awful lot of time and car back and fridge space and all the rest of it. They are super spicy. Oh, it's not working. They're super spicy on the cost front, and they do save a lot of time and waste sustainability-wise. Programmability, they're pretty industrial to look at, but what they come out with is pretty top quality, so they're good.
What's a freeze dryer? The freeze dryer is. I really wanted to unman. This is an expensive mistake. Usually, if you want to dry something out, then you want to dry it out through heat. Heat evaporates water, and like where freeze drying difference is there's no heat involved, so you freeze it all the way down, and then it's a vacuum happens and it pulls out the water. So you can really keep things as nature intended. I wanted to make instant coffee, but it wasn't working.
Everyone's familiar with like the relatively cheap dehydrators they use for garnish. Where freeze drying differs is that it removes moisture from water by sublimation. Wow, this is nice. Science. Oh, okay. Science sublimation.
So sublimation is the process where a substance transitions from its solid state to a gas without it becoming liquid.
We had a really good video of a solid thing becoming a gas without becoming a liquid.
So you can make like really interesting flavoured powders or shaped objects that can be then rehydrated later on.
That's a triple point slide. So that basically means that through pressure, the freeze dryer takes a substance which is usually it takes a solid, below the pressure it's able to exist as a liquid at triple point, so it changes ultras. So you can dry things without the application of heat. So if you dry out a banana, it ends up looking brittle and pretty ugly like this. It's going to taste like banana, but it's going to taste like cooked banana. And you can't rehydrate it because it's cell structure. Dehydrate citrus, everyone's done this in a bar, I expect.
Yeah, I mean it's slightly different when you dehydrate it with heat because the sugars and the acids are going to caramelise and it creates a kind of pleasing glazed effect on it, but it doesn't taste nice, it doesn't taste nice at all, it's eat it.
So if you freeze dry a banana, the cool thing is it comes out looking exactly like it did when it went in.
This was actually quite fun to freeze dry bananas.
It's brittle and it's light and you can microwave it into the dust.
You can kind of grate on top of everything like parmesan in a restaurant.
And it tastes like turbo banana. It's kind of like Ersatz banana sweets, like they used to taste one of those little foam banana things, like OG banana. grating super intense done on top of a daiquiri, or you can do it with pickled onions on top of the Gibson Martini.
Yeah, so freeze dried pickled onions, and then we then blitzed down and made into onion powder. So for the Gibson Martini, we had a rimmed glass with pickled onion powder. That was really good. But like the labour involved to get to that point was.
It takes sort of 24 to 36 hours to dry anything out properly, and once you've done that, you definitely want to keep them in a vacuum or with those little silica gel packets that you get with trainers. So, in conclusion, freeze dries are fun, but yeah, go on.
I think there could be a good use for freeze dryers with foraged ingredients. When they're only available for a short period of time in the season, and if you want to kind of create a big bounty of them, it could be a good way of storing them.
It's hard to describe them as essential unless you've got a space age theme bar. You can get kind of cheapish ones. Our one was very expensive. You can get cheaper ones that look like a chunk of Russian space station for about £3,000. You can figure out which one is the chunk of space station and which one's not. So usefulness.
I think we're missing the slides.
Usefulness. Not really. Sustainability. You've got to leave them on literally for 2 days, so it's definitely another thing. They do look cool.
And the stuff that you get out of them looks cool as well.
That is true. And yeah, I suppose, sorry, I've been spinning a little bit again. Yeah, we bought one at Crucible, but we kind of wish we didn't. So bear with this one, sir. Alright.
Ice cream machine.
Onto the ice cream machine. We're a bit obsessed with the ice cream machine. I'm sure that we don't need to explain to you how it works. They freeze things
And it stirs things. What's it going to do?
We had a whole graphic that had a stirring thing in it. So basically the stirring keeps the ice cream crystals small and the texture extra delicious. So
Yeah, I mean, you can make ice cream using liquid nitrogen if you want. It's more intense and it can taste creamier, and because the ice crystals are smaller, we generally don't fuck about with liquid nitrogen too much. You get frostbite, it's not nice. I mean, there's stories of bars in the UK where people are drinking it by mistake, so that's not something we kind of mess about with. Ice cream tastes great from the ice cream machine, it's fine.
So obviously you can make a bunch of drinks with it. You can make a boost you can make Robinos. No one at the bar is ever going to be upset if you give them ice cream.
No one is ever upset with ice cream.
And they vary in price, but you can probably get one for about €400 for most basic one. And so I think you've probably got an idea of where we stand on this one. So usefulness wise, we're giving it a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Cost wise is 10 out of 10.
Sustainability, yeah.
10 out of 10. Grammability, so it's 10 out of 10, so that's essential. On to the ultrasonic. So €250. They're a bit weird. They exist in bars. Often people don't seem to have much of a grasp on how they work. They're kind of weird and a little bit magic, and in the real world they're used for cleaning silver.
Yeah, maybe silver or jewellery normally. I think I have seen the kind of bar company selling sonic preps for like $2,500 or something. But it's a jewellery cleaner now.
Yeah. You can get them for £200 they do jewellery. They're basically
For $2,500 you can buy one of the jewellery cleaners the same size as a bath. You can sit in it now, but it's great.
So they bombard the object with molecules, some loosening oxidized stuff, and leave it all shiny and good looking. So if you do that to silver, you can imagine what it's going to do to organic material. In our context, it's a tool for homogenization, increases maceration significantly by applying sonic waves. So it's just more science stuff for you guys. As a non-thermal method, ultrasonic maceration increases the transfer of flavors that might be susceptible to
I think what because it has, like, to increase the speed of any reaction, you add energy to it, and normally the energy that you would add is heat. But when you're using ultrasonic energy, it means that you're not changing the flavour of it at all. Another really interesting aspect with ultrasonic is adding wood to drinks. I know that there's a lot of experimentation going on with aging, like kind of aging cocktails in small barrels in a bar perhaps. But I find when you do that, you have like kind of a couple of months where it hasn't made much difference, and then you have maybe a week where it tastes amazing, and then after that it goes on to tasting like sticking a pack of wood. Or there's the kind of other option where and I think the kind of Australians were in this for people in the 90s, where you add like wood chips to things, and it comes already tasting like sawdust. It tastes like the floor of a hardware store that's been cut wood. What the ultrasonic prep does, because you have so much energy, you can use wood with a lot of smaller surface area, so you can get a much more authentic aged taste. And I know that there's whiskey companies, particularly in Scandinavia, who are experimenting doing this on a much larger scale, not on a large scale. The kind of possibilities of aging things with kind of weird woods and stuff is massive.
Yeah. Another minor advantage is that the ultra kind of disturbs microbial cells, so it's quite easy to sort of keep a more stable product. It doesn't affect your liquid as much. So most of the time it's used for synthetic aging. So in the old days, if you wanted to make something taste of figs, you would put them in a jar with the liquid, leave it for a few months, or you put it in a barrel, or you can heat the whole lot in a saucepan. You want it, but obviously you're going to get the taste of figs, which is there, which may not be what you're after. I actually think figs tasted very much anyway, but I don't know why we chose figs. But if you've got an ultra, you just eat it all in a bag and buzz it. Really disappointingly, all of the movie bits from my presentation have disappeared. So, if you wanted to age your brandies or old fashions, as Tim might want to, you can ultra them. If you want to taste them like wood, you know, a bit of wood in there. It's all very easy. The other thing it does is emulsification.
So this is really interesting, this bit, and this is kind of, it's been very underused and kind of misunderstood, I think. And as I was saying at the very start about how we're extracting flavour, some flavour compounds are going to be hydrophobic and hydrophilic, so some are going to dissolve in water and some are oil. So this is a diagram of mayonnaise actually. So you would have oil and egg yolk and vinegar. Is that right?
Yeah.
You mix it together, then emulsifies and goes in there. For spirits application, if you have like a kind of flavoured oil, so an olive oil, if you put a drop of olive oil into a martini, into the bag, into the ultrasonic, what you find is the oil will emulsify throughout the whole drink, so you'll get a kind of milky drink. It looks a little bit like an absinthe, but you'll have the olive oil flavour throughout the full drink. And that kind of application is mad, because you can put all kinds of flavours into oils, into all kinds of oils, into all kinds of alcohols. So that's a huge application for that.
So if you are so yeah, if you're splitting your holidays all the time, it might be a good thing for you. And you can pick them up for about £100, so it's a pretty bang for buck wise.
I think like bang for your buck, I would say that ultrasonic is probably the most useful.
Sustainability, quick and effective. Grammability, probably not, doesn't look that good. But
a downside of this is it's fucking like really noisy, man. Like it's like getting drilled by the dentist.
You have to get a box. So be surprised if anyone in this room is not familiar with one of these. If bartenders love a rotovap, then bartenders love a fat pack bag, probably more than rotovap's actually. It's back to that old science thing again. So you can sort of have a big bag of fancy stuff with bits of food floating in it, and it makes you look like a pro. You know that. We've actually had bartenders preparing stuff for competitions at Crucible, pouring everything into backpack bags rather than bottles because it makes them look viral when they're showing up. That gets a minus point for sustainability.
I think it's a big minus point of sustainability. I think that there's an argument, obviously there's the whole thing, people don't want to use straws, but you should see the amount of fucking backpack bags these people are going through now.
They are useful, you can cook things at low temperatures for a long time, you don't lose everything through evaporation, and you don't get any of the weird adverse effects that heating will get you, and you can be very precise with the temperatures, or precise with the flavour you're getting out. You can pasteurize stuff.
Pasteurizing is good for sustainability, so you can do a big batch at once and just leave it.
So, you can't, I mean, I'd say that you probably almost can't live without one in modern day unless you've got a kind of medieval themed bar like this one, which will probably be broken. It doesn't require a lot of explanation, but I'd say it's pretty much essential. So,
I think, yeah, pretty much essential.
yes,
Is it ones that have animations or something?
I think we've got that with the pretty much there with the water bath. Tents all around. Carb stream. So carbonation is about forcing CO2 to liquid.
Yeah, it's making things fizzy. It's also good for sustainability because you can keep things for a long period of time. You can do big batches. It makes things delicious. It's really easy. It's really cheap.
Makes stuff taste like TV static, which is good. It's good for speedy service, it's good for pre-batching, anything with the CO2 lives for longer. That is the mid-level bars with some lower end bars are pretty much essential, I'd say, these days. So, yeah, useful. Cheap, about a couple of £100. Yeah. Sustainable.
Yeah.
Unless you live in the UK, but it's Brexit, CO2 crisis. And grammability, yeah, works because things with bubbles look nice. So, moving through onto the ink bird.
So this is maybe ones that are kind of more off the beaten track, I think. So the ink bird is, I mean, it's kind of like a thermostat that you attach to a fridge, so you can turn kind of any old beaten up fridge into fermentation room, or you can turn freezers into kind of small beer chillers for doing carbonated. If you've got kegged carbonated cocktails, you can have them. You can set the freezer to be at -5, so it's not going to freeze the keg. For fermentation, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can regulate the temperature of your fridge or freezer very precisely, so that you can precisely control the liquids within them. You can set. You talked about keg fridges. You can keep ice cream soft, but not like super hard. You can do fermentation.
It's very good for fermentation. I mean, yeah, especially if you guys have been following like the empirical law. I mean, depending on what you're fermenting, there's optimum temperatures for all different things. And so this is really accurate. The good thing about it being in the fridge as well is it keeps flies away, because anytime you do fermentation out, then you just open yourself up to onslaught.
And so it's also good if we want to talk very quickly about ice. It's a bit of a thorny one, but if we're going to talk about large format ice really quickly, people love that it looks great, they love putting a stamp on it, they like doing all of those things, but bartenders also love the science bit of going, well, it's because that it's a smaller surface area and it keeps your drink, it doesn't melt so much, it doesn't dilute your drink, which is all great stuff. But it also suggests as well that your drinks are so precisely balanced that dilution is a real problem. Not saying that large format ice is it's overused, basically. It's not stupid, but it takes time and energy to make, a huge amount of the prime belt.
It's a lot of energy.
And it takes time and energy to package, and everyone definitely thinks you need it. So with an Inkbird, you drop your fridge or freezer to -3, you can keep your... What?
Oh yeah.
So you can keep ice, you can keep an alcoholic solution, liquid at -3. If you use a frozen glass after that, there's no need for, I mean, you can use regular Hoshizaki cold draft after that, and there's no reason it's not going to do the job. Unless you're going to sit in front of your drink for 45 minutes. I don't personally don't sit in front of my drink for 45 minutes. I certainly won't after this. So large format ice basically is super wasteful, and this is one of the solutions for it. Usefulness.
I mean, this is so many different uses, man.
I think the thing that I'm not explaining very well is that what it does is it gives you a perspective shift on the fridge, which I think is something that nobody really views as a tool, they view as an object. And I think that's kind of what it gives you. Usefulness, definitely. Cost
of the
fridge.
Fridge you can only find an old one.
That's right on the screen. Being sustainable, absolutely. You're saving all those ice cubes. And Instagram, probably not great content. We're going to get on to weird stuff now. So we were asked to kind of see where we think the world of flavour equipment will be going next. It's what lies beyond right now.
What lies beyond.
So again, we've got nothing, but this, look at this order. Flavour blaster is a thing that comes out, you get smoke in a bubble, right? It sits on top of the thing, and I know a lot of people are looking at me, I can see eyes going like, what? And I think the important thing, the point that we wanted to make was it's important to distinguish between what we think is cool and what customers think is cool. And guests love exploding bubbles and smoke.
I mean, we love exploding. We had one in the office, and it was great fun, man. You just pour bubbles around, and you can hack it as well, and start making your own flavour bubbles, which is a lot of fun.
So I get why everyone's a bit like, it's a good thing. You've got to give the people what they want. The other thing is, this is really annoying, it's small, but it's a weird cocktail. It's got marijuana leaf on it. And we're not going to start advocating that you put marijuana in drinks, but since the legalization of cannabis...
Yeah, so this is mad, man. Like, in America, the cannabis industry is exploding. And the good thing about it also, there's all kinds of different innovations and equipment that is being used to extract different ways of getting your high out of.
So yeah, there's a huge amount of money being pumped into tech with this stuff. So there's a lot of weird hybrid bits of kit that extract from plant matter in different, really sophisticated ways. Usually extracting the THC, CBD, or making weed. I'm not very good at weed, but you know what I mean, making the resin stuff.
But basically, for any of the bits of equipment that are floating right now, if you read, oh, they're great for extracting THC, then we can use that to extract flavour. And the interesting thing that I found about all the weed or the marijuana technology is that because it's for stoners, there's all kinds of different price points. There's really cheap stuff and there's really expensive stuff. And so there's a price point for every one of them.
CO2 extraction. Now, formally, CO2 extraction is a hyper-efficient way, basically, of extracting phytochemicals using high-pressure CO2. And these things used to be the size of a room and cost about 10 grand. Now, this one, which again, you can't see this in a tiny bit on, there's one made by Oppo Labs, which costs about $3,000.
Yes,
€3,000. It's the first miniaturized supercritical CO2 extraction system. It's the size of a desktop and runs off the mains, which is kind of wild. So there's also, we've kind of been keeping an eye on them a little bit, and there's a bunch of abstraction bits of kit out there which are definitely worth keeping an eye on, as long as your mum doesn't like watch your internet usage. But there's like there's cold ethanol extraction, I'm just reading off, various forms of distillation, post-processing equipment, high pressure homogenizers, crystallizers. It's basically a bunch of stuff that can be useful to us. And worth it. Steve, you can talk about the rocket.
Yeah, so the rocket is something that you can't see here. This is something that the guys in the Fat Duck have been using for a long time. They use it to extract stock. It's a combination of a centrifuge and a rotovap. So where the flat spin on it being a rotovap, it's a centrifuge and it's all in vacuum. And they're putting in stock for their getting really quick extractions, really quick clear extractions. That's exorbitantly expensive piece of kit. But it does get you thinking about like what other hybrid pieces of kit we come across. Or can we start making and start innovating? I mean, can we start combining the ultrasonic with the rotovap and the ultrasonic and the ice cream machine or like more fun?
Yeah, we have to get the screwdriver out and get that. That brings us to the end. The fireworks work, doesn't it? So the fireworks is to signify the bright and exciting future for the future of flavor extraction. That leaves us time for questions.
Fantastic, thank you very much. A couple of technical issues there. Yeah, folks, any questions for Stu and Will, other than why they can't make PowerPoint presentations work? But I'm sure they will share their details and the presentation with other people. So any questions for Stu and Will? Well, that's good. I've got some questions for sure. I mean, you guys used to work in bars and restaurants?
Can hear.
Pardon?
Can hear.
Okay, you want to put your headphones on?
Headphones on, yeah.
Turn on one. Right, good now. Fantastic. Good, turn it on, turn on. Good. So, you used to work in bars and restaurants, incredibly cutting edge. You now set up a company that allows people to come in and play with this equipment. And are you learning from their mistakes? I mean, could you now go back into the bar world and create absolutely stunning drinks out of this world, etc., because of the experience you've had using these tools?
Yeah, I think you learn things. I wouldn't say people learning from other people's mistakes. I think we all learn together.
Nowadays, it does seem, if you look at the top 10 bars and the top 50 bars, etc., I think we know how many of them are using drink pads, whatever it may be, etc. But is it difficult, do you think, to compete with the idea of the off-the-shelf drink, i.e. a recipe that anyone in the world can make, versus the type of creativity that's coming from the use of some of these tools?
I think it depends what people go to bars for. You go to a bar, you want to be loud, you got yourself above that, and then you might go to a bar for that. Again, I think you can make it.
I think if you're going to a bar, then you're going for something delicious. And I think that there's many ways to make delicious, and it doesn't have to be a very expensive way of doing it. And you can make very delicious things very cheap.
Yeah, I think that the takeaway is that equipment is really
the idea that, I mean, increasingly people are breaking down barriers in front of the house, the back of the house, in the kitchen, in the bar. So, that's what they say. You know, the idea of creativity, I mean, somebody was saying to me the other day that they think a lot of cutting-edge bartenders now potentially would have been in the kitchen before, because they're working with flavours, they're working with the elements of precision and things like that, and maybe they're starting to lose out on the aspect of customer service, talking to people because of aspects like this.
I think the tradition of creativity in the bar world has always kind of followed the kitchen.
idea of the industry went through a phase of having fresh ingredients, etc. And then molecular microbiology, terrible work came along, and it was about chemicals, use of acid, maybe normal things, but pectin, lecithin, xanthan gum, and things like that. Now we've got the same dichotomy between foraging and fresh ingredients, hyper-seasonality and hyper-locality, etc. And then this idea of preserving flavours, extracting flavours, using science in a different way, etc. I mean, is the industry split it? Is just different schools of thought?
I think it's just different. Everyone's trying to make delicious. And I think you can get the molecular things where they're changing states. So you make a foam, you're making balls, or whatever. But it's all striving for delicious, and you get there in many different ways.
Right. I mean,
if you're not striving for delicious, if you're striving to be interesting, then I think it's a problem.
there was some debate for some time about modern classic cocktails. There are modern classics, margarita, brandy, espresso martini, etc.
Delicious.
Absolutely fantastic, but as we're moving more towards really unique drinks, bespoke, the use of tools where we're not, it's difficult to share a recipe, it's grown about theoretically. When we are entering at the end of an era, is there not going to be a progressive or modernist, modern classic cocktail that becomes, as even the equipment becomes more popular, it's not necessarily going to spread in the same way?
I think a huge part of becoming a modern classic is the replicability of it, and less things like that. I think it's like, it does come down to things. There's more that, I think a modern classic flavour profile, like a Pearl Star martini, it's made to be traditionally, loads of actually passion for a vanilla foam on top. That's still Pearl Star martini. So it's like at the heart there's still flavour profile that is the modern classic, but there's many ways to go.
Right, so any questions from Bill?
Hello guys, thank you for a lot of information I didn't know. So one question, what is, I'm from Latvia, from Riga. So a lot of guests is asking this question of the Nordic bar, which creates Nordic flavors for the drinks. And usually people from my place, because the city is not so crowded, we don't have so much cocktail, I would say. They normally use the mainstream of drinks. So when you use something unique, they don't really understand and buy it. So I need your opinion of what are you doing behind these roadblocks, when what is more important? Because in the end, we need to make the guests really happy when they step out of the bar.
I think that I think I understand your question, and my opinion is an argument of there's many things that can be delicious, but if you write it on the menu, no one's ever going to order it. Like if you have egg yolk in a drink, no one's ever going to order it. But as long as people aren't, maybe that's a bad example, but if people aren't allergic to eggs, and then you can have the drink, it's delicious, and then at the end, it's like, oh, by the way, that was regular. And then we're like, oh wow, that was delicious. Rather than, so it's one other right, if you have some weird esoteric ingredients to put in, maybe don't have to shout about it at the start, but maybe as long as it's delicious, you can explain at the end, and oh.
That's exactly that. Because, for example, we were making drink with cocoa fat. We were infused cocoa fat and bourbon. We were making syrup of Bales. We were using sake. We were making highball. But it was kind of like bartender choice. Every bartender loved to try that. Very famous people from our country came to our bar and just said, can you make me something else? That's the toughest part. You're maybe somewhere outside of the big city of cocktails like London, some cities big in Europe.
And in London, if you're producing those things on the menu, they can send back as well.
someone who looks at the creative aspect of what you do, etc.?
I think the beauty of all these pieces of equipment, and part of the reason that they're so widely in the market is they all work like CD players. Most of them have a play button.